This is Tax Pro Nation, the home of independent tax professionals. Find community, maximize your earnings, and live life on your own terms. I'm your host, Jeff Dolan, Vice President of Pronto Tax School.
And I'm your co-host, Andy Fry, founder and CEO of Pronto Tax School. My grandfather started Pronto Income Tax in Los Angeles back in 1965. My father and I carried on the family business and became tax business entrepreneurs. I launched Pronto Tax School because I know that given the right training and tools, you too can experience the freedom the tax business can offer. I grew up with a dad who wasn't working all the time, who had time to spend with his 5 children, who could take us to the beach on a Tuesday if that's what he wanted to do. The tax business can be an ideal business for people who want that kind of freedom, but it's got to be done purposefully in order to work that way.
And that's why we're here, to help you navigate your journey as an independent tax professional. Don't do it alone. Join the nation. Let's jump in. Welcome to episode 11, where we will be introducing a new guest on the show, Glen Wielandt, a 37-year veteran tax pro and entrepreneur who specializes in tax preparation franchise development. He has worked with all of the big 3 tax franchises and trained more than 100 area developers and 250 franchisees. He is the former director of franchise business development at Fiesta Auto Insurance and Tax and has owned and operated 18 tax preparation offices in the Denver, Colorado area. It is our pleasure to welcome Glen to the show. Good morning, Glen.
Good morning, Jeff and Andy. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much for making the time, and really excited to have this conversation with you. I know that, as you know, the multiplication step of the tax business is a really big challenge for a lot of people. And I was going to say that you've had a front row seat to see, how it looks to open hundreds of offices, but you've actually been in the movie, and part of it, and actually making that happen. So I know that our listeners are going to get a ton of, great information about what this multiplication step, looks like.
Yes, absolutely. I've been around quite a while, and sometimes I feel like I can't hold a job for too long before I go on to my next endeavor. So, but I have learned a lot over the many years that I've been in the business.
And why do you think that new opportunities, because you're right, you kind of have built up things and then you've moved on to a new opportunity, and we'll be able to talk about that as we go through some of your experiences. Why do you think you always have that hunger for that new adventure? What does that mean to you?
Well, it's I guess that's my makeup. I'm always I love new endeavors. I really enjoy starting new businesses. I like to see people succeed. I like to mentor people because I've also been mentored by many people. And I think it's only right, it's like pay forward, so to speak. And but it's also just my own personal thing about wanting to learn new things and hopefully becoming successful. And as I said, I like to see people and companies become successful. I like to be part of that.
That's cool. And so as you know, the tax business is, I would say, notoriously difficult to scale up. There's only a very few players in the industry who've been able to build up to operating hundreds or even thousands of offices. And you've actually worked with all the big companies that have scaled up to that level. So H&R Block, Jackson-Hewitt, and Liberty Tax. And many independent tax pros that we serve, like I said, and as you know, we struggle with that, when we're trying to multiply into new offices and add more employees. Why do you think that it's such a challenge for so many tax business owners, Glen, to scale up and to multiply?
Well, there's several reasons. The first thing is that people try it and they just don't have any tax business knowledge. They don't have any tax knowledge. Usually, sometimes not enough capital is involved, and you obviously need capital. Like they always said, it takes money to make money. So that's very important. Not having a good team around you to support you. It's very important that you have a good team that supports you and kind of want to do the same dream that you have. sometimes you're not properly trained. Training is very important. Without training, or mentoring, you really can't do anything. No passion is another thing in what you're doing. You have to have a passion in what you're doing. No drive. Some people start it and then they lose that drive. Or some people have no vision. They have an initial vision. They say, I want to be a successful business, but the vision kind of dies, and that's no good. And expanding too fast, that's another big problem. I've seen a lot of companies, they grow very quickly, and then they kind of die because of some of the previous reasons. So those are some of the reasons I can think of right now.
But other than that, it's pretty easy.
That's true. That's true.
If you can not do all those things.
So why do you think, Glenn, that the tax business seems to expand better as a franchise model rather than having corporate-owned stores?
Well, first of all, they have a proven model. Usually they test the model in the beginning, before they start franchising. And so it's a proven model. They do a proof of concept, and they say, hey, I've got a good model here. It's different than any other model. And it has to be unique. Every model needs to be unique than the other model, a tax model. So, so proper execution with the right team, and of course give the people a service that they really need. And as far as the tax business is concerned, remember, taxes is something everybody has to do. And so it's a good model. It's a good franchise. It's a good business.
But particularly for the franchise model where the owner is taking some risk and they're buying into that system, not every business makes a great franchise. So why is the tax business, been so dependent really on franchising in order for these companies to be able to expand to the hundreds and thousands of offices?
So basically, the franchises do well because, first of all, they have more money, they have marketing money, and then they have a proven model, which I already mentioned. So they do better. And inside the franchise, the individual franchisees that they acquire generally do better because the independent franchisee has money and time invested. So they will probably fail less than a corporate-run stores. I think corporate-run stores generally don't run right because the person that runs them have no real investment in business. And that's the way it is on the outside. So, if you have people working for you, sometimes they don't care as much as the owner itself. So.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was getting at because that's what I've seen. And you're a mentor. You've been a mentor to me. You've been a mentor to our Pronto Tax Business Opportunity members, people that we've helped start tax businesses from scratch. What role does mentorship and mentoring play in this multiplication step when you're trying to move into starting more offices, hiring more team? Why is mentoring important?
Well, mentoring is very important. As I had mentors in my life, and actually, I can't say Henry Block was my mentor because I actually worked for somebody that worked under him. But Henry Block actually started my idea of getting into the tax business. And then obviously after that was John Hewitt, who was a big mentor to me. But mentoring is very important. It's a mentor is someone who kind of takes a special interest in helping another develop into a successful professional. And so it's like a pay forward type thing. So it's very important to me since I was successful for many years with all the different businesses. And now it's my time to give back and mentor other people, as I'm doing right now with several people for Pronto. I learn a lot from it myself. And hopefully my mentee learns a lot from me because I have obviously a lot to offer. I made a lot of mistakes in my life, and hopefully not make the same mistake. And this kind of prevents my mentee of making the same mistakes. Them maybe creating a tax business faster than I was able to do when I started my Jackson-Hewitt days of opening from one store all the way up to 18.
So Glenn, let's back up and kind of cover that. So I heard that you were in the Army for 20 years. So much respect there. I'm a military brat myself, my father being in the Marines as a pilot. So definitely a shout out there to you. tell us a little bit about how you got started with that first office and what it looked like. Because it seems like, if you've been in the business for, 37 years, 20 of which you were in the Army, I'm guessing you were doing the tax business while you were in the Army?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I was a VITA person for the Army, and I was also the tax officer for a lot of units.
Oh, wow. Okay.
While I was in the Army. So what happened was, the Army didn't pay you very well, right? I wanted to buy a sailboat. And so I started moonlighting for H&R Block because of my VITA experience that I had with the military and my being the unit tax officer for the military as well. So my first job was with H&R Block. And, one thing about the Army or the military in general, they teach you organization, and they teach you execution. Those are two things very important in during my military career. And that I carried over to my business career after the military. But yes, my first job in the military after I did the VITA and the unit tax officer, while I was moonlighting for H&R Block, I actually ran all the military posts in California while I was in the military. So that was kind of fun. And that's actually my first experience of how much money you can make in the military. I was working I was stationed at Fort Ord, and I was moonlighting for the Salinas Monterey area H&R Blocks, and I believe that 1 year I saw 28,000 tax returns coming through. I said, "Wow,
what?"
Yeah, I said,
"That's crazy."
I saw dollar signs in my head, and that's what. So right after I got out of the military, I went and looked I wanted to buy an H&R Block, but the only ones that were available were like up in Vail, because I had moved to Colorado by that time. And all they had to offer was like an office in Aspen or an office in Vail. There were really nothing in Denver. So I went to number 2 at that time. That was Jackson-Hewitt. And that was the start of my business with Jackson-Hewitt.
So did you actually buy that business?
Yeah, I did. So I bought one territory in 1992, December of 1992. I'll always remember. It was like the middle of December of 1992. I went to training, and I opened my first office January the 1st. So I did it all like in 2 or 3 weeks.
Wow.
And I opened my first office in Denver, Colorado, Inglewood, Colorado. And over the next 9 years, I expanded up to 18 offices. What I actually did was, over 5 years, I expanded to 18 offices, and then I curtailed it towards the end down to 12 offices. The reason for it is basically I learned a lesson. It's not the number of offices that you own, but it's the amount of tax returns that you do in each office that's more important.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing. One of the things I learned is don't open too many. You can open as many as you want, but make sure that you do a lot of tax returns in each office, because I would rather have 10 offices that did 2,000 returns, but my 18 offices basically did about 15,000 returns, so which is not bad either.
Are you somewhere in your tax career and feeling lost with what to do next? Do you sometimes wish you had a map to show you your next step to reach your full potential as a tax professional? Here at Pronto Tax School, we have developed that guide. We call it the Pronto Path, and we want to share it with you for free. Go to taxpronation.com/path right now.
I want to see if Jeff can talk for a second about this particular episode of the show is going to appeal to and really make a really big difference for a certain part of our audience more so. So if you're sitting here listening to this and the idea of opening multiple offices, it appeals to you, but you're also kind of scared. If you're scared, that's probably a good thing, because like Glen's saying, you don't want to grow out of control and get in over your head. So Jeff, can you talk a little bit about, for this multiplication and for people that want to grow and learn the secrets of it, and how Glen's going to be able to share some of that stuff, what part of our audience is going to get the most out of this and why?
Yeah, so I think there's several folks. So I mean, obviously, if you are an experienced tax pro in the industry and you've been doing it a while and you've been saving your money, you might be looking at maybe buying a store, maybe buying a franchise, or starting your own business, right? And so I think Glenn is going to have a lot of insight into, and I want to ask him, how did you know it was the right time? Because that's kind of scary. You can stay in your existing situation, make good money every tax season, or you can kind of go out on a limb and get into your own business. So that is kind of a major step. So anyone in that decision point, I think this would be a good episode. I also think somebody that's running a bunch of offices is going to get a lot of insight out of Glenn's wisdom, right? And then maybe even, Glenn, the other side of it, which is I want out. I want to sell my business. What are some ideas that you have when you were going through the buying process and the selling process to go from 18 back down to 12 that you had to learn to sell those franchises or those businesses?
I think that's the groups of people that are going to get the most out of it. And also people that if you're helping a company expand, you're part of that team that Glenn talked about. So it's a totally, correct me if I'm wrong here, Glenn, but I know this because I've done it myself too. It's a totally different thing to run one office and be successful running one office, tending your clients, being obsessed with client service, doing a great job. And then suddenly you've got 4 or 5 offices. I mean, isn't it an entirely different animal?
Yeah, the first thing, was when I was sitting at H&R Block, in Monterey, and I saw all these tax returns. And I saw how easy it was really to do a tax return. And I said, well, why can't I make that kind of money? I can do this, myself. I learned everything. My district manager at H&R Block taught me quite a bit. She was sort of one of my mentors as well. And she's actually the head of California CTEC today. So it's kind of nice how I saw her evolve over the years. But anyway, so that was my first thing. Maybe that was my greedy part of myself. I wanted to make money, So I started with one the first year. I saw how easy it was. I didn't do a lot of tax returns. I did about 200 tax returns. Plus, I had a virus that year. Those were the days when viruses couldn't be contained. We didn't have virus checkers or anything like that. We were using those big floppy disks, those 5 1/4 disks.
Oh, yeah.
And so I could have done more if it hadn't been for the virus. I was actually out of business during peak season, the first week in February. So I could have probably done another 100 or so easily. But anyway, so the following year, I said, okay, I can do this, and I can probably do quite a few. So I went to 5 offices in year 2. Well, that was a mistake. Going from 1 to 5 was just too much. I didn't have the right people in place. I did it haphazardly. I just found a location with no thought whatsoever because the rent was cheap. And, and the funny thing was, I didn't get a lot of support from Jackson-Hewitt. In those days,
it's funny now. It wasn't funny at the time, probably.
No, I know. I mean, I probably lost a lot of money, that first couple of years, just learning everything. But it's something that now I understand, and now I can execute a little better, and I can teach future people not to make the same mistakes I did. So anyway, so going too fast, that was one mistake. I didn't, even though I had tax schools and trained people, I had one guy in one of my locations. I'll always remember that. See, I was a tax man. So I went from doing 700 tax returns that particular year myself. So I didn't have time to watch the other offices as closely as I should have. I found out in March that a guy was stealing tax returns from me at one of my locations. He, and if I had delegated the amount of tax returns that I did myself and pay more attention to my offices, I probably could have been more successful that year. But anyway, I learned. So the following year, I added 3 more offices. Then in 1995, my 4th season, I actually went up to 18, and I kept 18 for a couple of years. And then eventually I found out, hey, doing 100 tax returns in a Walmart doesn't really make a lot of money after you pay the rent and everything. So I cut it down to eventually, my 9th year, I had 12 offices that were functioning. I actually had 6 storefront locations and 6 territories. And the storefronts were doing good business. They were growing very well. It was my Walmarts, my Kmarts, And in those days, they had Montgomery Ward. I don't know if anybody remembers.
Montgomery Ward. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And actually, Montgomery Ward treated me the nicest. They gave me a 20 by 20 kiosk, which is large. And the reason is because they were going out of business.
I was going to say.
They had the space.
Yeah, they had a lot of space, and it was funny because, we had a refer a friend program. And I had a girl standing at the front door of Montgomery Ward. This is another mistake I made. She would be giving out these coupons, and if her code was on it, she would get like $20 for every referral. Well, she would pass them out to people who had appointments with me already. So that was another mistake. So, but anyway.
So Glenn, real quick, this is new to me. I don't understand how you could be doing tax returns yourself and running multiple offices. Explain that to me.
Yeah, I did it, but you shouldn't do it.
Okay.
So I went from actually the first year from 700 doing tax returns, I went down to 200 the following year, and even that took a lot of my time. Finally, in the third year, I finally got it. I said, wait a minute, you need to. You're the president. You're the CEO of the company.
Right.
You need to be out there getting clients to come in there. You need to market, and not do tax returns. Anybody can do tax returns, right?
So is that something, Glenn, for the part of the audience that really knows that they want to multiply their business, they want to have more offices, they want to have more employees? Would you say that it's like they should stop cold turkey doing the client work and really commit to this new way of growing business and growing their business and multiplying and not doing all that client work? Or is there a happy medium? Well, how would you what would you tell that person?
It's hard to tell a person who's been doing taxes all their life, to completely go cold turkey one day.
Right.
So that takes time. So, but definitely, my advice would be, if you want to own a tax business, and we're not talking about being a tax preparer, just a tax preparer. If you want to own a tax business, you definitely need to be out there getting business for your business, and that's very important. You need to learn how to delegate. Now, one thing I learned, somebody told me this. They said, what you do is this. Okay, so let's say a client comes in, they ask just for you. So what I would do is I would say, hey, I would introduce them to one of my preparers and say, hey, this is Susie. She's a real good tax preparer. She'll be taking good care of you. And I, as always, will be in the background, make sure that she's giving you good service. And I will be making sure that I'll check your tax return, make sure it's completely correct, and giving you good service. And so that works. That actually works. You just have to do it slowly, but those work.
I think it's an ego thing too, because if you look at any other industry where you've got the craft of the business, right? The actual work that you're doing, in this case, preparing tax returns, or you could be doing, creative work or coding or, the actual work of the business versus managing the people who do the work. And you're stepping into a different role entirely. That's hard for a lot of people because your identity is tied up in it, your ego is tied up into it. And I think there's also the argument of, you don't want to lose your edge. I've heard Andy talk about that a lot. Even being on this show and talking about tax preparation, he doesn't want to lose his edge dealing with clients and being in the trenches, if you will. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, so my first training really was with H&R Block, and all they taught me everything. I mean, they taught me how to do tax return, how to run an office with tax preparers, how to become an enrolled agent. They gave me the proper training for that, corporate tax returns, things like that. But really, the experience that the training that was really good was at Jackson-Hewitt, where they taught you to go from a small business to a medium-sized to a large entity. Okay, and that was something that was very important. The problem was I didn't learn that until my third year when I had intermediate training at Jackson-Hewitt. Plus, John Hewitt was, he was a lot of help too, because he was an H&R Block guy, preparer, went to a district manager, and then he started owning, Liberty and also Jackson-Hewitt. It's really important if you're going to be a multiple office person or owner, that you really learn more about business than taxes. Taxes is really secondary in the tax business. It's the business that's more important. You have to run it as a business, not as a tax preparer.
So I'm glad you mentioned John Hewitt. And in case somebody's been living under a rock, or they're like Jeff and maybe a little bit newer to the tax industry and coming from another industry. Not that you've been living under a rock, Jeff, but talk a little bit about John Hewitt and what a impact he's had on the industry and some of the things that he's done. So we get an idea of, because you were directly mentored by him, of just give us an idea of some of the things he's accomplished in the tax business.
Yeah, John Hewitt's a genius, first of all. He's no longer in the tax business as he left last year. However, he's a genius. He's a bridge player, a chess player, and he's so smart. In the building that he had, we had like probably a couple of hundred people working there. He could go from office to office and make chess moves and remember, what he had done in other offices. And he would just go around and make chess moves as he walked around the building. But he taught me everything about the tax industry. Like I said, he was a true genius. He was, after Henry Block kind of retired, John Hewitt was the only real tax person in the tax industry, as far as franchising is concerned. He's a driven man. He was very driven. I used to spend every January when I was the director for Liberty Tax. I used to spend every January with him, and every day he would teach us something, something different about the tax industry. Very driven man. His goal, by the way, was to beat H&R Block by the time he was 55. Well, the problem is it didn't happen. H&R Block is so daggone big, but he grew it. He grew Jackson-Hewitt, and then he grew Liberty, which is now one of the top three. But he could never beat H&R Block. He really tried. That was his goal. So he was a very driven man, and he was very focused. But I saw his life evolve, over the years. In the beginning, he was very easygoing and everything. And as he matured and everything, and as he got more business, I won't say he became a recluse or anything, but he was so driven that he was so focused on the business that he kind of lost some of his social skills, so to speak.
And maybe some of the enjoyment and the fun, when you reach that level, it's hard to maintain feeling of the joy of the business. But I think that's some really interesting insight. And if you had to pick out one thing that you took away from your time working with Mr. Hewitt that's really stayed with you, what would it be?
He says that if you follow the system, which most franchisees admit they have, you will never be a failure. You will succeed. And I can almost tell you that is almost totally true. There are some exceptions, of course, in life. Every franchise model has a system. If you follow that system, I'd say 90% of the time. By the way, most people only follow it about 50% of the time. But if you follow 90%, you will never fail. And every person that did fail that I've seen has deviated from the system. And I think so it's very important. If somebody has a proven model, that you follow the way that they want you to follow the system, basically. So we used to call FDS, and it's true.
It is so true. I mean, you could see that across different industries where, somebody proves something, proves the model, tests it out, spends, gobs of money and time proving out the system. And then again, the ego comes in and says, well, I can figure out how to improve it and do it better. And you end up not doing certain things.
Why are you looking at me when you're saying that? I'm very offended right now. But Glen's going to have a good laugh too, because I've been on the other side of the spectrum. Where there's been various times where people wanted me to buy Liberty Tax franchise or Jackson-Hewitt franchise, and I was always more interested in being the franchisor. And still am more interested in that than being a franchisee. And part of that, when I really look at it, especially, as a little bit younger days, was just not wanting to follow the system just because it was somebody else's system, and just like didn't want to do that, and like in kind of a frankly kind of a dumb way. So I think if you're out there right now and you're thinking you want to have multiple offices and be that business owner, not just that tax professional, we have to create that system. Like if you want that to happen with your business, you have to create that system that somebody can follow, and you can really feel that confidence that Mr. Hewitt felt to say, hey, if you do this, you're going to get this result. It sounds like that's kind of what you're saying, Glenn.
Absolutely. And every tax franchise that I've been in usually has something unique, something different. And it's true. Everybody can do taxes, right? I mean, doing taxes is fairly simple, but owning a tax business, you have to focus, you have to be driven, you have to love it basically, and learn from your mistakes, and don't make the same mistakes again, and you'll be successful.
Isn't that the trap though, Glenn? Because I think like, but Andy, I have a revolutionary idea. Glenn, I'm going to revolutionize the tax business with this idea, right? And then they totally fail.
I think Andy's probably a good example of a person who's tried thousands of things, right, Andy?
Yeah, I have tried a lot of things. It's probably reaching up to the thousands. If you're including all the things that I tried today.
Yeah, and I've learned, actually, it's funny. I learned a lot about Andy too. I mean, there's some good and some not so good.
Do tell. No, I'm just kidding.
But Andy keeps on trying though, and that's good. It's
key.
Very good.
Yep.
That's very key, especially if you want to grow. I mean, Andy comes from a very conservative background, so to speak. Am I right, Andy?
Yeah, conservative is kind of a loaded word because it means different things to different people.
Yeah, I meant in the growth of your offices and things like that. But Andy's trying to get out of that. He really is, and he's exploding now. And I truly believe that, and that's the true story. I mean, that's a true fact.
Are you thinking about getting into the tax business, but not sure where to start? Maybe you're not even sure the tax business is the right fit for you, and you don't want to invest a lot of money or time quite yet. You just want to get a taste of tax knowledge and see if you like it. Or maybe you're an experienced tax pro and you see someone else in your world who needs an introduction to the tax business, but you don't have time to teach all the basics. If either of those situations sound familiar to you, you need to check out the Pronto Tax School Basic Income Tax course today. It's fun, entertaining, and gets you a real IRS credential. Go to taxpronation.com/basic to find out more.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of the things that's been so fun about working with you and learning from you and us all, frankly, learning from each other is we all agree that a system's so important. But what's the new system that's going to work so well in this new environment? Because yes, there's still a lot that's the same about the tax business, but I think you'd probably agree that there's a lot of change and there's a lot that's different too.
Yeah, no, actually, that's the one thing I learned from you. The first 3 weeks, I think you asked everybody, who's your client, right? And I never thought about that because, I always set up a storefront somewhere and people would come to me, right? So I said, hey, everybody's my client. But you know what? I learned in this course that it is important because most of our students don't necessarily open up a storefront.
Right.
So, for instance, this is a real, honest, true story. I asked one of our students, I said, who's your client? And he said, I'm interested in senior care. Seniors and senior care.
There you go.
And you know what? It's funny. And I said, why? He says, well, in 3 years, I'm going to retire, and I want to dedicate myself to the senior community. So anyway, believe it or not, it works. We're doing part of our proof of concept right now is that we are appealing to all the senior apartments and condos.
Perfect.
And guess what? We're doing tax days at these places. Tomorrow, we're doing one at a senior care place. They have like 1,000 units. I think that is something we really have to push. And I'll tell you why. Because as they graduate, they don't necessarily have an office, but they can certainly go into these senior places because remember, those people aren't as mobile as your regular tax client, right? The regular tax client drives their car to the tax place and does their taxes. Well, a senior person has to be picked up by bus, possibly, or, and so now we can go into that complex and do taxes right there because of the software it's scan, send, and save, right? You can scan all their documents in, and then when you get home, you do the tax return for them. And that's what he's doing.
And what a cool idea that we're helping someone figure out that system, right? Where they know who they're talking to. If they want, hey, I woke up this morning and I want to do marketing. Like, well, what does that mean? Like, who are you trying to reach? How would you reach them? All those kind of things. I think that's an example of that working out. And so for the next person that comes along, that could be something to plug into, right? And it was already figured out that, hey, this works out and this works well. So I think that's a great use of your franchise knowledge, really, because you start to see that system forming. I did want to give you a chance to talk about your experience at Liberty Tax when you, I believe, were helping other franchisees, right?
So basically, when I sold my Jackson-Hewitt company, the very next day, I called John Hewitt and I said, "Hey, John, I'm out of a job," And I told him I had sold Jackson-Hewitt, and he says, "Well," I was about the time. Remember, he had a non-compete. He had sold Jackson-Hewitt for $525 million. Had to leave the country. Yeah, he went to Canada. He had a 3-year non-compete, and so what he did was he bought the second largest tax service in Canada, which happened to be Liberty Tax. So in Canada, he had 250 offices, but he couldn't come to the United States for 3 years. So just so happened at the end of the 3 years is when I sold my Jackson-Hewitt. And so I called him and he says, "Well, I'm just starting, but how would you like to run my first 5 offices in Columbus, Ohio?" And I said, "Sure." I said, "That's no big deal." And so I did. And then right after that, he gave me 3. Yeah. And then he gave me, so then that summer after I finished that project, I went to Virginia Beach and he gave me 3 states. And we didn't have a lot of offices, but we had to, we sold a few offices. But then by the end of the summer, he had given me the entire Western region, which is 19 Western states. And that's when we really started growing Liberty Tax. And so, so I had as many as 100 area developers and about 250 offices that I managed. And so I did a lot of, obviously I did a lot of mentoring. I did a lot of training and a lot of traveling. Basically what I did. I was I lived in Denver at the time, and I was usually on the road 25 out of 30 days. So
wow.
So Glenn, I want to ask you this question as an outsider, right? So in my little town, I'm trying to remember where I was living at the time, but it doesn't matter. There was
it in Kentucky or Tennessee?
It might have been Tennessee.
It could have been Indiana.
No, I actually lived in Nashville for a long time. So I would see these little tax preparation businesses kind of pop up during tax season. And I always drove by this one store and, it was a little, in a little strip mall. And they didn't have any logo or branding or anything. It was just like this white sign with black letters that was real plain. It just said tax preparation or income tax or something. And then I noticed that it got bought out by Liberty Tax. And then all of a sudden there was a Liberty Tax little sign in the window. I was always wondering how that worked. Like what kind of person is attracted to this no branded, no logo? It looked very disheveled, in other words. And I was trying to understand what was going on in that business and how are they growing? Like how are they marketing? How are they selling? Never understood it from the outside looking in.
I'm going to tell you a big secret that you probably don't know. Those offices were already, when they opened, it was either a Jackson-Hewitt or a Liberty Tax. The reason was they didn't do much branding in those days. Okay, and because I remember my first office only said tax service or income tax on the sign, the banner. Mm-hmm. In fact, in those days, we could put banners up if we wanted to. Now it's more regulated. You have to have, letters or you have to have a big box sign, things like that. Branding wasn't important in those days. Marketing was very few. So that office that you saw was actually a franchisee sitting in the head office, either for Jackson-Hewitt or Liberty. Now, as branding got more important, then you started seeing, Liberty Income Tax or Liberty Tax Service or Jackson-Hewitt. And the funny thing, Jackson-Hewitt, that's a poor name, right, for taxes. people would come into my office and they say, "Is this Hewlett Packard?" Or, you know, so the branding just wasn't there. I mean, Jackson-Hewitt is probably the worst name anybody could ever give, but it was a combination of Mel Jackson and John Hewitt who decided to call it Jackson-Hewitt. So that was the worst name. Liberty actually was a good thing. Liberty was by the way, Liberty Tax was a thought of the marketing vice president. They were standing in front of the, in the corner in Vegas where the Lady Liberty is, the statue.
Uh-huh.
That's how Liberty Tax came about.
No way.
With that statue.
Yeah, it's ironic you mentioned that the branding at that beginning stage wasn't as strong because Liberty Tax actually became known as really genius for guerrilla marketing and for branding and making whether you go there or not, that there's a Liberty Tax on that corner, because of the dancing Statue of Liberty and some of the other guerrilla marketing tactics. Talk a little bit about, because you guys were really explosively growing at that point. I mean, you're on the road 25 out of 30 days. You're opening new offices, developing new territories. What role did guerrilla marketing play in that multiplication stage at Liberty Tax, Glenn?
It's funny that was something, again, the genius of John Hewitt. He figured out that it doesn't cost a lot of money. You don't have to spend a lot of money to market. And that's how he came about. If you think, even to this day today, I don't think I've ever seen a Liberty Tax commercial on TV.
No.
Because they don't do it. And Jackson-Hewitt has cut down, same thing. They do stupid things now too, but they work. The Lady Liberty, Uncle Sam, those things really work. In fact, I remember the early years, most people who didn't even know about Liberty Tax, the only reason they came into the store was because of the Lady Liberty that was outside waving. And sometimes it's funny when you see a Lady Liberty with a beard, right? So, but guerrilla marketing, and it's doable. It's been proven that guerrilla marketing does work.
So, Glenn, talk a little bit about this, because I mean, you are from a different generation where there was the ability to compete with a lot of these foot traffic type marketing campaigns where everybody today is looking at their screens, right? Can you talk a little bit about how our listeners can be navigating that or thinking about the shift in marketing that's happening?
Yeah, it's become more technological now too. I mean, with social media, that's big. I mean, Facebook is big, and it doesn't really cost a lot of money. So that guerrilla marketing idea kind of works with that. But then, sometimes you do have to spend some money marketing, but it's completely different now. I mean, in the early days, technology wasn't big. It wasn't really big. But now it's important. And probably social media, I would say, would be the most important thing these days. So if you spend it right, you can get the clients with not spending a lot of money. I mean, again, mistakes I made, right? In the early days, they say, hey, if you put an advertisement on the movie screen, it works. Well, it doesn't work. If you put your advertisement on the back of a register, cash register or receipt, that doesn't work. I had one person my whole life coming back because they saw that ad on there. The bus stop, I'm not sure that works. People sit on your face and things like that.
They're looking at their phones.
Yeah.
They literally don't even see it. But
now they have the texting. I mean, we have a company, Andy can probably say it, the Texelon, right? Andy, that kind of can work. Our software even now has the ability to contact the client, say that, hey, your return is in. Used to be I used to have to hire people. When I was doing 15,000 returns, I had a lot of refund, route checks, refund anticipation loan checks. In one day, I could have 300, 400, 500 checks coming in, and I have to have somebody to call every client that their check was in. Well, now you can just text everybody in one group text, and it's done. So technology has come a long way. So,
but the genius of the guerrilla marketing and what John Hewitt saw and what you guys were able to do, I think, can still be carried into that new environment. The idea that you don't need to spend a ton of money, but if you're creative about how you go about it, to get that attention from your market. That can still work today, but in different ways.
Oh, absolutely, and that's one thing I talk about when I do my weekly presentations to the mentees. I talk about that. I mean, I mentioned like 50 different things you can do instead of spending a lot of money. So for very little money, you can get good results.
Tax pros have seen it coming for years. The entrepreneurial wave is here, and that means more opportunity to do corporation, S-Corp, and LLC business tax returns. With the new tax law, they're even more complex and in demand. Professionals who increase their skill set in this area can expect to become more profitable and successful. Pronto Tax School has the perfect online training course for you called Business Tax Verified with CPA Adam Shea. Find out more at taxpronation.com/business.
So if you're marketing, you're bringing in business, you're trying to multiply your business, you're opening new stores, marketing only brings in the attention and brings in people walking through the door. Talk a little bit, Glenn, about the sales acumen part of it and building a culture of sales within the office and being able to, frankly, close some deals when people come in. And that helps your marketing pay off, right? So is that important and why?
Yeah, I didn't really learn about sales until I got to Fiesta. Fiesta Auto Insurance and Tax Services, before I got there, they were predominantly an insurance franchise. And they were salespeople, right? They sold insurance. Mm-hmm. It was actually there that I learned how important a sale is to get that client. Because, in my day when I was doing taxes, sometimes we'd do the whole tax return. At the end of the tax return, the client would say, your fee is too high. I'm walking out, or, hey, I can go somewhere else and get a larger refund. And that was my typical client. But at Fiesta, actually, we started teaching people how to make the sale. It worked. It worked at Fiesta. The offices were doing so many more returns the following year. It's a skill. And I know we had David, on our staff at Pronto teaching that, how to make the sale. And it's an important part of the whole service. Again, the sale is probably more important than doing the tax return. I can do any tax return, but the sale is harder to do, to get the sale.
Well, I think now, especially people have so many more options and consumers research so heavily, and they may shop more aggressively or they may call 5 tax places before they decide. So a lot of tax people, because we're technical minded, we're kind of resist that idea, right? That sales is important, or we don't want to consider ourselves salesperson. Do you see that?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen it a lot in the past year, as a matter of fact. Two things. People are afraid to charge. That's one thing. So, they have they do a good tax return done correctly and everything, and the fee is like $250, $300, and the client says, "Gosh, that's expensive. I can go down the street and get it for $50, and they don't know how to counteract that. I think with more sales experience, that would probably solve that problem. I saw it several times in some of the Pronto office. Well, one Pronto office in particular. They're a tax person, and they also feel for the client, and the client will be there, pleading their case, and they tend to go along with the client just to say, "Hey, I'm afraid that I'll lose that client if I don't lower the fee." So I know the service at Pronto is probably the best I've ever seen. The repeat percentage each year is probably higher than H&R Block. H&R Block's repeat percentage by like 60%. And I can say at Pronto it's much higher than that.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. But I think you're exactly right. And I think it's part of it is a culture of sales of where selling is good. And people, if they pay a little bit more, that allows even better service and for high quality mentors like yourself to be involved and find an opportunity. And so I think that's something that we definitely can continue to grow into. And probably a lot of our listeners that are in the tax business, they may relate to what you just talked about not feeling like you're able to charge what you should be and other things like that. It's kind of an epidemic, right, in the independent tax businesses?
Yeah, think about this. Think about the pharmaceutical industry, right? Think about you buy a pill, whatever pill, and the pill costs $50 a pill. Well, that the pill itself only probably costs maybe a nickel to make, right? But what you're paying for is the research that they have to do to figure out what the pill can do for you and everything. Same thing with the tax industry. Those people that we have are fully trained on customer service, on doing a correct tax return. They have to train every year. They have to do update classes. They have to learn tax law. They have to learn the new tax law, which had like 1,100 plus pages. So, that's what you're paying for. You're paying for that. The guy down the street that's charging $50, they're not, first of all, they're probably not CTEC certified for one thing. They're probably not taking tax classes. They're just there to make a quick buck, and they're working on volume. And that's exactly what it is. I've had many offices like that when I was in Denver. Office down the street did for $25, and they did like 2, 3, 4, 5,000 tax returns. But by April 15th or April 16th, they were no longer there. They disappeared. So it's important, and so pricing is very important. It's hard to teach pricing. A lot of our preparers are kind of ill prepared to say, hey, you owe me because this is correct. I've done a lot of work for you, and I deserve it.
And this is the value to you. And that, when it comes down to it, is, that's what sales is making somebody understand that whatever money you trade with me for the service that we provide actually helps you, and you'll be happy to pay that because you see the value.
Absolutely.
So, Glenn, I heard that you rapidly expanded in a new tax franchise. Is it Roni Deutsch tax service?
Yeah, that was that. Well, I did expand.
Well, you did expand. Yeah. So tell us about that. How did you get into that and expand, and kind of what happened? What were the challenges there?
So after I left Liberty, actually, Roni Deutsch found out that I was available through, I was on a list of, who's who in the tax industry. So she called me one day. She said, let me fly you to Sacramento and let's talk, because I really want to grow my tax business. Roni Deutsch was known as the largest tax resolution law firm in the country. Mm-hmm. And when you do tax resolution, you have to do a lot of tax returns. And so she was farming them out to like H&R Block, Jackson-Hewitt, Liberty, whatever, to do their taxes. So she said, hey, that's stupid. Why should I do that? And let's start a tax franchise. And so that's how she called me. And she said, I want you to run the tax franchise. So I was made vice president of tax operations, and we created a tax franchise. We started with 0 franchises. Within 2 years, we had sold over 300 territories. We had opened 65 offices. That's very fast for a new company.
Yeah.
So now what she was doing with all her leads for the tax resolution law firm, she was farming them out to the franchisees to do the tax returns.
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, and it was a great concept. And she was very picky about signage, the way the office looked. Every office had to look the same. I remember in my second year there, we noticed that the color was off on the street sign, the box sign, and she replaced every box sign because of that color.
Sounds like she took a page out of the Starbucks playbook.
Absolutely. Yeah, she did. I mean, she was very meticulous, and she treated everybody very fair, and the franchisees loved her. I mean, the annual convention was multiple, I won't say millions of dollars, but cost her quite a bit to do that for her franchisees. So she took real good care of her franchisees, and that's another thing. As you grow, you need to take care of the people who take care of you. Very important.
I would argue that's your number one job.
Yep.
Because they'll in turn take care of your clients, right?
Absolutely.
So it sounds like it was going very successful. You rapidly expanded. What could go wrong?
Oh yeah, everything can go wrong.
That's why it's called business. How much time do you have? No, but seriously, because I think it's really important for our listeners to understand that, they hear of all these successes that you had and this career of, being mentored by John Hewitt and doing all of these great things and growing these companies. But I think it's important to be real with our listeners. We have a policy on this show of being real and being able to talk about things that aren't always pleasant and aren't always rosy and shiny. So, that Roni Deutsch tax service, even though it did expand rapidly, wasn't able to kind of keep going. So what did you learn from that process, and how did that go?
The only reason the Roni Deutsch thing didn't work was because of her situation on the law side. The tax resolution law firm was sued by then a guy who was running for governor of California, Jerry Brown. And he wanted to put something in his cap to show how successful he can be, and to show it as he was running for governor of California. What happened was Roni Deutsch had complaints. She was doing tax resolution, and for those people that don't know tax resolution, it's if you owe the IRS a lot of money, Roni Deutsch was able to bring it down to a reasonable amount, either or forgive the whole amount. Well, when you deal with the IRS, you're not always successful, right? So obviously the people who did not get what they wanted filed a complaint against her. And at some point she had about 1,000 complaints because she did a lot of business. And so that's kind of what brought down the company is the counts. We call each complaint equals one count. And that kind of multiplied to 1,000 at some point. That's when Jerry Brown came in, sued Roni Deutsch, and she went down. To this day, and by the way, just to let you know, to update everybody, Roni Deutsch is okay now. She's fine. Took 5 years, but she's okay now, and she's hopefully she'll come back.
It's good to hear. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, because she wasn't wrong. She was by the book. She did everything by the book. Everything, with her mannerisms and the things that we had to do at the offices, it was by the book. There were only 2 of us that weren't lawyers on her executive staff. It was me and her brother. We're the only non-lawyers. Everybody else was a lawyer up there. And so she was by the book. So she is a good person, but that's what happened. That was the downfall of the RDTC tax services.
Yeah, and I think I know that she's somebody that you have a lot of respect for.
Absolutely. I still do to this day. She accomplished a lot. She started in her garage. That's how she started her tax business and grew it to an office. And from an office, she grew it to a corporate office, So she had her own building. We were in this big building that she owned, So yeah, she's a successful person in my mind.
Yeah, and I think it's something where if you're listening to this and you really want to expand your business and grow your business and have 10 offices, have 20 offices, have 100 offices, you got to be prepared for the possibility that something doesn't work out right. This isn't like tiddlywinks that you're playing here. You're going to get involved as you grow your business with some serious situations, and you're putting yourself out there to, sometimes things don't work out. So I appreciate you sharing that story. And I know that when she listens to this podcast, it'll be great to know that that all the respect that you have for her and what she did accomplish. Want to move towards wrapping up this episode, Glenn. And thanks so much for investing your time to be here. Sometimes people are looking at the tax business right now, as you and I were talking about as we were doing the business opportunity program. And in light of all the recent challenges, so you're seeing, increase in self-filing, right? Commercial office space is very, very expensive now, especially in an area like Los Angeles or New York, which makes the cost structure of a more so seasonal business can be challenging. The new tax law that just was passed that supposedly simplifies tax filing. And so people are looking from the outside, and you're kind of the consummate insider, and they might be asking, is the tax business still the great business that it's been? And if so, why?
Absolutely. I still think it's the business. I don't think we'll ever get that little postcard. It's impossible. The poor people would complain about earned income credit, tax, child tax credit, et cetera. The rich people would say, hey, I'm not getting enough deductions and things like that. So that little postcard, I don't think will ever happen. And in fact, because of the new law, and I understand there's going to be a part 2 later this year, the House and Ways Committee in Congress is actually working on a part 2 of the tax law this year. So we're going to see probably some more changes. And then in this last budget, there were some tax implications as well. So the tax business is definitely not dead. If it was dead, you would see, not particularly H&R Block, but Jackson-Hewitt and Liberty going into other endeavors, which they're not doing, So the tax business is big. It's alive, it's thriving. I think what we offer, the tax business opportunity, is a great entry into this business. You know, you start from small, and as you gain knowledge and experience, you go into bigger things. Definitely. Anybody who's thinking about doing the tax business, remember, death and taxes, right? You will always have taxes. Now, another thing, I think, I'm not sure if you mentioned this in one of your other sessions, but, you know, other things you could do in your office. Like my last company was Fiesta. We did insurance and tax. Everybody has to do insurance. Everybody does taxes. It works well together. And I think we're doing a beta test right now in one of the Pronto offices. You know, they definitely work together. And it's funny, in the insurance business, January through April is their busiest time, as it is, of course, with our tax season. So don't give up. This is a good business. It's a good service business. It's a business you can do part-time if you want to. You know, a lot of franchisees, they work very hard January through April and maybe do a tax school in the fall, but that's all they do. They go on vacation the rest of the year. So it's a great business.
Yeah, Glenn, we actually talked about that on episode 6, stabilization.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where the idea of adding a new service and being able to stabilize your business. So I'm glad that you did mention that. By way of conclusion, Glenn, if you were sitting down with someone, and those people are probably listening to this episode and saying, you know what, I am that person that I already have a successful tax business, you know, by other people's standards of I have one office or I have 2 offices. It's already going pretty well. I could stay at this point, but you know what? I do want to multiply my office. I do want to mentor other people and sort of replicate my success and get on the road to doing some of the stuff that you've been a part of, you know, and expanding bigger companies and growing, you know, quickly and all that fun stuff. What would you say to that person if you were sitting in front of them right now?
You know, if you do it right, you can do it with the right help. I'll just give you an example. At Fiesta, I had one franchisee. He started out with $35,000 on his credit card. Today, he owns over 35 offices. Now, how did he do that? He started in Fresno. He goes, all his offices today all the way go down to San Diego. Then the reason what he did was he started himself, you know, and opened up like 10, 15 offices all himself. Then he saw a lot of good people in his offices, the people that worked for him, and he decided to make them partners. And so what he did was he would partner up with somebody and say, hey, why don't you open up 3 offices down in San Diego? Or why don't you open up 3 offices in Orange County? And today he owns 35 offices. He's probably the only owner to maybe 15 or 20 offices, but he's partner with the rest of them. And so this man is taking home millions of dollars every year. And just think, he had no money back in, when in 2009, he had no money whatsoever.
Yeah.
So when we talk about multiplication, that's what he's doing. And I think one day he might even own Fiesta, you know, the way he's going.
Well, it sounds like he's got what we talked about in previous episodes. He hires empire builders. He hires people that have a mindset of building empires, not just people that are, you know, well, I'm just going to run this one little office and that's it.
Yeah, you know, the funny thing is he does it all from his house. He bought a beautiful, 200-300 acre piece of land, put a beautiful house on it. He does it all from home. He has all these little cameras. There's a camera in every office. So he knows what's going on in all his offices.
Good for him.
Time.
We need to have him on the show.
Oh, he would talk your head off. But yeah, he's good. He's a good example of how you can grow safely. And he was kind of, he did some fast growing and you know, he saw some pains, but he learned. He learned from his mistakes and he's doing very well today. So
I think your message would be you can do it, but you've got to do it in a purposeful way, in a systematized way, and be able to grow in a sustainable way that works for you.
Right. And you have to have passion. You have to have passion what you're doing.
Well, Glenn, thanks so much for joining us to talk about this multiplication step. This step is such a challenge for many tax professionals, and I can say that because I know how it goes. It's been a big challenge for me. And the fact that you've seen it firsthand, this multiplication aspect, really on multiple occasions and been part of it, and that you've been good enough to share your knowledge today. I know it's going to be a really big, huge benefit for our audience. And I just want to thank you for coming on the show, and we hope you'll come back again.
All right. Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate the opportunity, and talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks, Glenn, so much. It was a pleasure.
Take care.
Well, there you have it. I've been Jeff Dolan.
And I've been Andy Fry. Thank you for listening.
All of the show notes for this episode can be found at taxpronation.com/11. We have created an infographic of the Pronto Path so you can see all of the steps in one place. Go ahead and download that at taxpronation.com/11. We hope this episode made your life a little bit easier and more profitable. Join us next week as we talk with an executive experienced in being an entrepreneur and how to lead inside a larger company. If you are working for a company as a tax pro and want to level up your career, or you lead a group of folks and want to find rising stars, you will not want to miss it. See you next Monday. Take care.